BC and Simon here. The truth is king. We are here with Radu Popescu. He is the tennis coach for Elitsa Kostova. I hope I didn't butcher your name. We've got experience here with Mihaila Buzarnescu. He was the manager of her for 3 years. Noi Romani, the television channel. He was a sports anchor. This guy is big deal. I'm so glad to have him here. And currently, he is the director of a tennis club in Toronto. It's called Tournament Park Tennis Club. And I'm so happy to have you here, Radu.
Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate that.
So, first things first, tennis is an individual sport. And the women that you coach aren't just the only people that you coach. You coach people from stage one all the way up to professional.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, when you've got a young kid who's 4 years old, the first question I have as a parent is what makes a kid tick and how do you know that they're going to have that it factor?
Hard to say. Like now we're starting kids off a bit younger, like 4 or 5. Before it was maybe 7 or 8. Like I started at 7, so now we're seeing kids starting much earlier because the parents are very eager in getting them into the sports and stuff like that, and they really want to focus, engage it on a sport right off the bat. I'm always a bit skeptical about that. I want the kids to do multi sports until at least they're 10 or 11, until they really love a sport and they could really truly commit to it. But it's also important to do multi sport to really develop many factors, right? Like being able to catch, pass. So I'm always a big fan of like doing soccer, tennis, hockey, just to really gauge all those sports together. But to go back to your question, it's hard to tell when they're 4 or 5 if they're going to be the next Bianca Andreescu. It's very tough to say. Certainly, we have kids 4 or 5 that are a lot more energetic. They have really good hand-to-eye coordination, and that could be because, let's say, the dad has been doing a lot of passing with a soccer ball or doing catch with him or her, so he already sort of has that. Or we see in some cases genetics, where the kid is just a phenom because the parents were both ex-Olympians or top athletes, and the kid you could see has that the gene factor. But is that going to lead the kid 10, 15 years down the road into being a pro tennis player? Very hard to say.
You mentioned Bianca Andreescu, and the mental factor has been highlighted in the media with Maria Andreescu, her mother, who's coached her along with a lot of mental tactics, let's say, and the psychological side of the sport is that maybe your main job as a coach?
It's definitely a big part. Certainly, I think that's a big component, especially when you start to go pro. That's a big factor. And, what happens is from the early stages, when you do decide to go pro, you're playing very small tournaments, 15,000s, ITFs. And in most cases, unless you have a huge budget, you're traveling by yourself. So you're like 95%, maybe 98% of the girls or guys are traveling by themselves. Unless you have a serious budget, the federation's really supporting you because you're a really good junior that has great potential to turn pro. Maybe they'll help you with a coach here and there. Excuse me. But otherwise, you're traveling by yourself. And that's a huge factor because being by yourself in a hotel room for 2, 3 months, playing all these tournaments in, pretty much places that you've never been, it really does play a role in your psyche. So, unless you're really mentally tough, you're going to get affected because you're by yourself. Your parents are not there. You're still young, so you really have to be strong mentally. So it is true. A lot of these players do have a sports psychologist back home that they would maybe do a Zoom call with them or call them and get some information, some feedback from them, or they'll talk to their coach back home over the phone to really get some input and how to sort of focus on the match and what went wrong, what went right. But more so than that is just like how to deal with being alone for such a long period of time away from your family or support group in a country like Tunisia where, it's a foreign country in Africa. You might not feel fully safe and all that. And, it really does play a role in your psyche. So you definitely need that support. And knowing, like I mentioned to you, knowingly so, a lot of these girls just don't have that there because they're there by themselves. Now, like guys, it's a bit, I would say, easier just because, maybe they're there with a bunch of other guys, friends and stuff, and they're more okay of being away from home. But as a female athlete, young girl, it's a bit more challenging, I would say.
You know, you know me. I've been over in Romania playing sports numerous times, and there's like a honeymoon period for the first few
Yeah,
months,
yeah,
and then after that, it's like
yeah. Very well said.
you end up having such a it's like almost like a withdrawal from your regular life.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to talk about the WTA and the ATP have a reputation kind of similar to the UFC, where their athletes aren't maybe getting compensated enough to make ends meet, but it's $1 billion industry basically. Like they make crazy amount of money. So is that part of that struggle, knowing that you're not going to be comfortable tomorrow potentially?
Yeah, I would agree 100%. So just to clarify a few things. So prior to you getting into the WTA, you're going to play ITFs. Doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl. So it's an International Tennis Federation. So the ITF represents for women the smaller tournaments, the 15,000s, the 25,000s, the 50,000s, 60,000s, and 100,000s. Anything over 100,000 becomes a WTA tournament. So to However, even if you play the 15,000s, how like if you do well or whatever points you accumulate in that tournament goes towards your WTA ranking, right? So it doesn't matter if you play ITFs, whatever you do there goes to your WTA rank. However, if you're a player ranked like 350 in the world, you're barely breaking even. Like you're making, I don't know, prize money $30,000 to $40,000 a year, but your travel costs, your coaching costs, your physiotherapy is like 80 grand. So you're in the whole minus 40, right? So that's why a lot of these players, rank 300, 200s, they end up playing Bundesliga. They end up playing these leagues in Europe. So it's a lot easier if you're European because you could just drive there. You don't have to fly, right? Or you could catch a very cheap flight. And they'll play leagues in France and Germany and Luxembourg and Holland. And what these leagues are all about is you play, let's say, Brandon, you're signed in for 5 matches at 3,000 euros. So you're guaranteed 3,000 euros regardless of your results. Now, they'll toss in some bonuses. Let's say if you win 3 out of the 5, we'll give you an extra 1,000 euro. If you win all of them, we'll double up. We'll go 6,000, right? So that's a lot of money because if you play, let's say you play league 5, 6 times a year, you multiply that by 3,000. You're going to get between 15 to 20,000 euros right there. That's going to cover your expenses for travel and all that, right? So that's going to be sort of your backbone, right? But if you don't have that, you're in big trouble because you're ranked 300 in the world, which is a very high ranking if you think about it, because there's not a lot of pro players out there. So you get a very decent rank like that. As a matter of fact, there was an article: the 100 best golfer on the PGA Tour makes on average 1.1 million a year. Well, the 100 best tennis player in the world does not make 1.1 million, female or male. They make maybe at best 200,000, right? But your expenses are roughly around 100, 125,000, so you're not really pulling in that much. So it's very challenging. So I think, to go back to your question, they need to change the pay structure. I really do believe they need to increase prize money at lower tilt tournaments. Otherwise, the sport's going to die. They have to raise the bottom higher because the top is making so much money. Like the top 20 guys are making crazy money, but the guys ranked like from 130 down, they're not making that much money. And if you don't make much money, but you have to pay for everything, just like the UFC, the travel, your coaching, all that, you're paying out of pocket, right? So guess what? Your expenses are the same as the guy ranked number one. You're still traveling, you're still sleeping in hotels or motels, and you still have to pay for your staff. So it's very expensive. Therefore, I do believe that the lower tilt tournaments, they have to be able to increase prize money.
Yeah, it seems like the sport focus primarily on those main athletes, the
Correct.
the big ones getting that equal pay. But WTA is so popular. Every time I go to Rogers Cup, it's full. These female athletes are incredibly popular, and it's to me it's more enjoyable because there's more rallies. There's more going on in terms of the mental side of the game. The men are less they serve up big and they try to finish points quick. It's a different game. And I guess my next question on that is, as a coach, you've got a parent coming in and they say, my kid is going to be a pro player. You say, oh, well, you know what? I've got a hunch that, if they've got some tools there, but what do you do to kind of prepare parents for that deficit until it's like a lottery ticket essentially, right?
It is, and I'm actually quite a realist with them. Some people don't like it, some people like it, but I'm right off the bat a realist with them because I don't want to offer them fake promises or milk and honey when that's not the case. And I tell them, guys, listen, you want to go pro, that's fantastic, but let me tell you what that entails. And I tell them straight up, and I give them proper stories, factual stories of my players and what we've gone through. And I said, are you willing to spend $250,000? And that might not guarantee you anything on your return, right? So it's virtually like a restaurant. You want to open up a restaurant, great, but you know that, what is it, 96% of restaurants fail in the first year, right? So it's the same thing. Like, you can't guarantee anything, right? So, and unfortunately in Canada, it's a little bit more difficult because you have to travel because we're being so far away from Europe and other places where, and here in Canada, we just don't have a lot of tournaments as well. So the fact of the matter is you have to travel to Europe. Well, that's going to cost you right off the bat, what, $1,300 just for a flight to go there, right? So, and then you got to fly there. So it just gets very expensive for a Canadian player where, let's suppose you're from a country like Romania. Well, you could drive to any country in Europe pretty much, right? Or you could get a cheap flight. So it's a lot more, I would say, easier on your wallet a little bit. Where if you're Canadian, it's definitely a lot more trickier, right? It's more expensive. And even if, let's say, you play in the States a lot of tournaments, you want to go pro, again, that's still expensive because you got to fly down there, $350 easy for a flight, and you got to rent a car. That's going to cost you money as well. So it all goes back to the finances, and I tell parents right off the bat, like, do I believe your kid is a good player? Yes. Do I think that your player has potential? 100%. And I think a lot of players in Canada, unfortunately, have had tremendous potential, but they fell through the cracks because they just didn't have the financial backing, be it from sponsor, from the federation, or simply their parents just couldn't do it because it's just very expensive. And I think now with this pandemic that's occurring, a lot of people took a huge financial hit. And I don't think that their ways are going to go towards, hey, let me just invest $250,000 in my son and daughter in tennis. So I think that's going to take a big tilt. You know what I mean? So I think sponsors would have to step up and support, I'd say top juniors that have some sort of a potential. And we have a lot in Canada that could potentially be the next Bianca Andreescu. We do have that, but again, they need the backing. And I know Tennis Canada is suffering right now, especially with not having Rogers Cup last year and potentially not having it this year. It's a huge financial blow. So, they just don't have the money right now to support the athletes. And therefore, they really need the support, especially the ones that have a future, and they have a chance. Especially there's a lot of new up-and-coming juniors as well. But again, they could be great, they could be fantastic, but if they don't have the financial means, the backing, then it's very difficult for them to go anywhere.
Yeah, money really makes sports go around, whether it's football, tennis, everything. And when we look at Canada, for example, a lot of the athletes get a lot of flack because they move their permanent address to tax-free countries.
Correct.
And a lot of people don't understand that they'd be paying that 18-20% to their coaches and the staff that they hire. The season is so long and it's grueling to play 3-4 hours of tennis for, say, every other day for a couple months. That really affects the body.
Yeah.
Can you speak on the fact that, or I guess tell some stories on the mental struggle there is when you're playing with injuries and there's another match in a day, but you can't back out because you'll get in a little trouble.
That's right.
And you got another tournament a week away that you got to think about.
Yeah, it's a tough struggle because the season is very long, the tennis season. So it's not like, say, hockey where you get, the summers off right off the playoffs. Let's say you don't make the playoffs, you get 4 or 5 months off. That's not the same in tennis. You're playing pretty much 49 out of the 52 weeks. So traditionally, there's only about 2 weeks off season in December where you do more like stuff in the gym. You work on your fitness before you depart to the Australian Open. So like you said, excuse me, the season is grueling and every week you're playing. So you can't really take a week off. You do if you're really injured and you have some issues. You got to be very smart with how you program your scheduling so that you don't burn yourself out You choose the tournaments that you think you're going to do well, and you know you could have a good chance. And also the traveling. You don't want to be able to play, say, one tournament in Colombia, and the next week you're going to Korea, and then the next week you're in Germany, because you're flying all over the map, and your body's just not going to get used to all the time zone changes. And that's a big factor. I speak to a lot of the players, including myself. Like when I was in Australian Open in 2018, I flew Toronto to, where did I go? Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong to Melbourne. Well, it's a 16-hour direct flight to Hong Kong. So like, whoa. And then there you're like, okay, we're getting close. Well, no, you have another 11 hours to go to Melbourne. So it's a really long flight, and it takes a lot out of you. So when you land, you got to be ready to go. There's no like, oh, now I got to sleep a day or two to catch up. You can't do that because you're already ready to go. And that's the problem, because the tournaments are right next to each other. So when you arrive, you're checking into the hotel and you're going to the practice courts to feel the ball and, see if there's any air pressure difference, or, if it's altitude or any of that kind of stuff. So it's very difficult. And back to your question, let's say you have an injury, and all these players have an injury. There's nobody playing at 100%. There's no such thing. You could be playing at 80, 90%. And I bring up Bianca Andreescu. When she's playing at her 80, 90, she's beating girls at like 95%. So you're never 100%. You always have some issues with your lower back, your knees, your elbow, etc. So, the problem is every week that issue could increase, and it could be a lot worse. So you have to manage it at each tournament by seeing physio, seeing the doctors presented to you there at the tournament, and making sure that you contain that issue. Now, a lot of the girls that are top 20, like Simona Halep, she has a physio and a orthopedic doc with her, traveling and seeing what the issues are and trying to fix it. But a lot of the girls, I would say 80%, or the guys, they don't have that. So they take advantage of the doctor and the physio presented to you at the tournament. Now, in a lot of cases, and I've seen this personally, the doctors and the physios are very good, like really top notch. But there are situations where they're not. So that's the thing. It's like hit and miss. You could get a good physio, you could get a good doc. They could really help you out. But it's really hit and miss. I was traveling this past the fall in Portugal, in Madeira, with a player, and she started to have some knee problems. She's never had knee problems. And it became clear that she couldn't push off. So luckily there was a physio there who's the head physio of like a Portuguese handball team. She was very good, helped a lot, and was able to do proper taping and everything, and it really helped her. But going into the next tournament, again, what happened was, because she was not able to push off, she was sort of using other parts of the body to sort of compensate for that. So she started to injure her upper glutes. So there was other injury involved, and she had to fight through that in the second tournament in Portugal. So as you can see, the issue, if it doesn't get solved right away, it sort of snowballs into other tournaments. And then you have to take off 2-3 weeks to fix the issue before it gets worse, and then you really can't play. So it's a good question, and it's something that a lot of players are struggling, especially that the season's so long. And it's come to attention, both of the WTA and ATP, to make the season a bit shorter, to do like a 36-week season, compressed, but with spacing. Roger Federer was a big guy on this, Rafael Nadal as well. Let's space it out. Let's do 36 weeks. Let's do a couple big tournaments in there, the Grand Slams, but let's not do this 52-week season, because it just doesn't make sense. You're burning out these athletes, and it creates a lot of struggle, right? And it's the same, like, how would you expect like an NHL player to play a year straight? They would die out. Like, it's impossible.
Oh, I totally see what you're saying, and it's as somebody that has taken some steroids in the past, and I'll admit that, there is an elevated physical, I guess, wellness that comes with it. And when doping becomes a question, it really makes me wonder, why is doping the question? It really should be, why are people doping?
Right.
Because when we look at these seasons, it's like, how is a player supposed to make a living fighting through injuries and so on when their durability is impacted by fatigue? And what does doping do? It impacts fatigue. It elevates your performance. It recovery times. So I remember a Romanian tennis player recently. I forget which one. I think it was what's her name? Bogdan. Uh, she wrote something about how it's kind of unfair, and I think it was Bogdan.
Anna
Uh,
Bogdan,
uh, I think it was her sister. Uh,
well, Lena Bogdan, but they're not related.
oh, they're not. Sorry. Uh, she wrote something I think about how it's tough to break that top 100 because people have that extra care, and whether it be they've got loopholes
Yeah,
around getting the doping and
yeah,
all that.
yeah.
Would you be able to talk about the struggles that players have getting from that, say, like 500 rank, just in terms of care and dealing with fatigue and going all the way up to that top 100?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, if you don't, like, again, it goes back to the financial resources. So, if you don't, like, if you're a player ranked 4 or 500, you're just not getting the care that a top 50 player gets, because the top 50 player would have a staff traveling with them, a physio, an orthopedic doctor. Um, and these are very qualified individuals that are really supporting them and giving them a lot of help. Where if you're ranked 400, you'd be doing what you and I would be doing, is going to a sports clinic in your hometown, and somebody told you, hey, this doctor is really good, and you would go down there, and you would make a connection with that doctor, and you'd probably be attending that clinic every time that you're in town. But that doctor will not be able to travel with you, because guess what? They have to get paid, right? So these players simply can't afford that. So the care they're getting is simply just when they're home. So whenever they have an issue, they'll go see the doctor. But that's the issue, is that whenever they have an issue, they see the doctor, but they don't do it prior to the issue to stop the issue from happening, right? So, and that's exactly why top 20, 30 players, they have somebody with them, like a fitness trainer, and somebody that knows exactly, like a kinesiologist, how to stop you from getting those issues. They have a plan in place so that you go through the proper training, through the proper cycles, so that you do not get hurt, right? And if you do, they have the care there. But the problem with these girls, 300, 400, is they're doing it all on their own, and a lot of them are not specialists. They're not kinesiologists. They're not physiotherapists. They're not doctors, right? They're tennis players. I mean, they have some knowledge, and when they go home, they'll see their doctor and stuff like that. But it's just not enough, and that's why they're always a bit behind the eight ball. And that's the difficulty of not having a team, right? Not being able to have a support with you, to give you that attention all the time, right? So it's a struggle, and that's why it takes a special breed. I say, like a special animal, to be able to do it on your own, psychologically and physically, and be able to get the results. It's certainly a special breed of a person to do that. So it's definitely very, very tough.
Yeah, I see that, and it's like when you're an athlete and you're doing two practices a day, and then you've got a game coming up, uh, your livelihood depends on it, first of all.
Yes,
And second, it's like when you're going through these things, it's like that girl is, or that guy is just, he looks so fresh. What are they doing? What are they eating? And they really want to get in on that. And I think that's not just in tennis, but any sport.
that's right.
If the schedule is so demanding, it tells them, I've got to do a little bit more to get to where I want to go. And that's a risk I'm willing to take. And sometimes, obviously, that impacts Sharapova, for example. It impacts people. But you really wonder, does the sport have any blame in this? And should they maybe, as you said, take those steps to make sure that the players come first and not the
Well, I
money?
really do. I really do. And I think that's the push for the future. I don't know if it's going to change, but if they want to make this it is an all around sport. Tennis is a very much viewed sport around the world. You have millions of spectators, WTA, ATP. But I think if they really want this to be inclusive for everybody, including the lower ranked players, then things have to change. They really do. Otherwise, the sport's simply going to die. If you don't have the bottom, the top can't just go on. You need the bottom as well. It has to be a structure. And if that structure collapses, then the whole thing just falls apart. You just can't have a sport led by top 20 players. It just doesn't work that way. You have to have the backing. You have to have the lower ranked players as well supported, and I'm talking about the players like 300, 400, 500 in the world. You gotta have some support there as well, and even the lower ranked players too. If you want this to be like a cycle, and you want people to join tennis pro and then go through it, you have to have a much better system. And like I said earlier to you, I think the lower ranked tournaments have to be higher pay. They just have to be. I understand now with the pandemic, it's a bit of a challenge, but once we get out of this mess, things could change and sponsors to get involved. And this is also like with the lower ranked tournaments. I think more physios required, more doctors are required. You can't just have one physio because you're going to wait in line forever to see the doc. So you need to have a better setup, and I think this could be done. They know this too. It's just a matter of getting it done.
Oh, absolutely. And you see that same issue in Canada right now with hockey, how it costs thousands and thousands for a young person just to play rep hockey. And uh, tennis is an individual sport that's very expensive. So is hockey, and you see those different elements encroaching on families and their decisions to say, look, do you really want to go through this? But on a positive note, I want to flip this and go in a more positive direction and speak about why people do this. Because uh, I know for me personally, what drives me to do sport is that moment in your head where you've done something and you can replay it in your mind for the rest of your life. What drives most of the players that you coach?
Well, I think it's the passion, the desire. It's just the passion within. That's what it comes down to, right? So it's like, you get a switch, and if you like tennis or any sport, and you get that switch in your head, and it becomes sort of a passion in you, and you just want to keep fulfilling it. Doesn't matter what the results are, but you're so passionate about the sport that you've given pretty much all your life to it since you're a kid. You've committed to it. You want to keep doing it. You want to keep uh, pushing through it, even though there's struggles. But you've committed to it, and you're certainly so passionate about it that you want to keep grinding, and it just doesn't stop because you're so passionate about it that you're willing to sacrifice many factors because it ultimately is the love of the game, and that's what it comes down to. I mean, look at guys like Roger, Nadal. They're a lot older now. Roger's pushing 40 in August, and he still wants to play, and he still has personal goals. He wants to get another medal at the Olympics, and there's these personal goals that they still have. Novak wants to get the most Grand Slams. Nadal just doesn't want to give up. He wants to chase Roger as well. So it's these personal goals and the passion that doesn't stop. Look at Yarmer Yager. He's what, 55, 56, and he's still playing in the Czech Elite League. He still wants to play in the Olympics. Unbelievable, right? So, Patrick, playing in the Sharks, going in over 1,500 games. It's the passion and it's the love of the game, and I don't think you can't take that out of the guy's heart, right? So ultimately, I think that's what the players strive for, and it's very tough to get it out of them, and even though it's not rational, sometimes it's not. We look at them and they're like, well, these guys are crazy. What are they doing? They're 40. They haven't retired. They know that, but it's the will to play. It's just I don't want to stop because this is what I love doing, and if you take it away from me, I don't know what I'm going to do at home.
That's the big one, huh? What's next? Because it's like a lot of them go into coaching, but outside of that, you're not going to go and work at the local store.
No,
Not after this.
no, no.
Uh,
A lot of them do
so,
coaching,
oh, sorry.
but on that
Oh,
note, a lot of them don't like that. So it's just like they want to keep playing. It's like I want to keep playing. I want to keep playing till I have to stop physically.
oh, absolutely. And that's where obviously that post depression comes in if somebody does get that injury. But on the good notes, we see in the media these moonshots where players just come out of nowhere, and coaches like you who are at Tournament Park Club, you see those players from a young age, and it's like no surprise here. This person just launches up into the stratosphere. What clicks at some point for a junior that's going pro, or in Buzarnescu's situation, a junior that was very successful and just went through the stratosphere in like 3 months. It was just insane. What is it that really clicks? Is there something that clicks? How do you explain it?
I think for each player, it's an individual thing. I think what clicks ultimately is you start to get on a groove. You start to feel that you're starting to win, and that gives you confidence, and confidence builds that sort of momentum, and you just ride that momentum. And for Buzarnescu, it was a fact of like, oh, I'm not injured anymore. I'm healthy now. I don't have any more surgeries, right? So that's off your back of your mind. Like, I'm finally healthy, and I'm starting to win matches. So you start to get in that groove of winning, and you don't have to worry, my God, am I going to break down? Am I going to have an injury? Right? I'm healthy, and you start to win. You start to win, and you have that game, and so you quickly start to build up the rankings, right? And I think for each player, it's individual. I think ultimately, it's just getting the confidence. And if you're a good junior, and you know how to win, and you know how to come through matches, then later in life, when you do decide to shift to pro, or you play college in the States, and after that you decide to turn pro, um, you relate back to those matches of, like, you played a three setter in juniors or in college, and your mind starts to go back to that. Hey, you know what? I remember what I did there to come out on top, right? So you still have that knowledge, but it's also just getting lucky as well. I hate using the word luck, but it does have a big factor, where you start to get on some match winning streaks. You win 3, 4, 5 in a row, and you feel so confident that when you hit the ball, everything's a winner. You're just like, boom, boom. I feel so great, and I'm unstoppable, and they feel that way. And you get on these long winning streaks, and it's not really explainable. It just happens naturally because you're in the zone, you're feeling really locked in, and you're just delivering. And it could be the opposite as well, where for whatever reason you're off the zone, you're not feeling good, you're no explanation. Like, you could be practicing really well, you could have had a really good day, you had a fantastic breakfast, but you played like garbage simply because there is no explanation. You had an off day, and that off day could affect you if you start to think about it, and it skids into the next match and the next match, right? So it's the same with team sports. You could go on a 10-game winning streak, right, because you're firing in all cylinders, or you could go on a 10-game losing streak because some things were not working, right? So it's hard to really pinpoint, how is that kid gonna, you know, turn on that switch and start to be on a roll. I mean, Bianca Andreescu is another fantastic story. She was playing ITF Challenger. She was playing low tournaments, like the low financial ones, the 25Ks, 50Ks. All of a sudden, here comes the Open in New Zealand in 2019. Boom, she plays it, goes all the way to the finals. And then since then, nonstop, she won Indian Wells. She goes to the semis of Miami Open. She wins Rogers Cup. Boom, she wins the U.S. Open. That came out of nowhere. Nobody knew who Bianca Andreescu was prior to the Indian Wells. They're like, who is this girl? Right? After she won Indian Wells, they're like, wow, she got confident. She felt the confidence. Her game was there. She had the game. She had all the ingredients. She was able to put it together, and certainly the confidence kicked in. And maybe she had that lucky thing that she wore around her arm, the hairband that maybe played some psychological games for her in a positive way. And she went on a streak and didn't stop. And she won the U.S. Open. So you hear a lot of these stories; they do happen. And in some cases, the athlete continues to be successful, or continues to maybe drop a bit. Another story: Monica Puig from Puerto Rico. She won the gold medal at the 2016 Rio Olympics. She was a top 50 player. She was a good player, but was she a gold medal player? No. She just got like, she came hot. She just kept winning and just got in that groove where you just can't stop it. She took out some top players in that Olympic tournament, which is very tough. The Olympics, in my opinion, are tougher than the Grand Slams because it is really tough competition. You're playing against the top 60 players. And, by the time you get to the quarters, you're playing the top 10 players, right? So it was a phenomenal win for her, and that's a huge gold medal. And again, it was just, she got in that groove, she got confident, and she just took it with her. And look at that, she took home the gold medal.
You said there's nobody really sees it coming, but I think it was Wayne Gretzky claimed he saw, was it Wayne Gretzky claimed about Andreescu?
Or that possibly.
That he saw Bianca training when she was young and said this girl's work ethic is gonna put her to where she is today. And when we look at fundamentals, because as a coach, you do this every single day, is our fundamentals something? Because I'm thinking about, for example, Kornikova. People said she is an unbelievable athlete, but she didn't have the fundamentals in her game. Uh, if somebody does somebody need to have that perfect fundamentals from a coach like you right from the get-go to have that chance at being lucky?
I do. I think the fundamentals have to be there. You have to have the base. You have to have the foundation. If that's not there, it gets very tricky. I think you have to have a strong foundation, and Bianca did have that. I think Tennis Canada did a phenomenal job building her, and she had all the resources, she had the staff, and she had it since 12. So that was built and insisted in her, and I think that was a huge factor in her where she is now. I really do believe that. Now, did Anna Kournikova not have that as a junior? She did. I mean, she had the support and the backing, but I think it all goes back to the individual of the player. I mean, she was a top doubles player. She was a world class doubles player. Of course, they wanted her to be, a top singles player. Didn't turn out to be. She was still a very good singles player. She just wasn't, number one. But she was a world class doubles player. So it wasn't all for nothing. She was still a very, very good player. So it's hard to say, but I think the foundation, as you say, and the fundamentals have to be there. That's definitely a given, and if you don't have that, you're gonna have a hard time later in life in your career for sure.
Yeah, we see that with big servers. They can get away with it only for so long.
Yeah.
With what you do on a daily basis, do you run? I'm curious what it is that you do in terms of trying to develop those fundamentals in a kid. Are you looking at, I want to see the big picture instead of just what it is that we're doing today? We're not just doing some drills. I want to know what goes through your mind when you're creating programs and developing, say, a 10-year-old, because are you look basically, are you looking for a 10-year-old and you're picturing them as a 22-year-old pro, or are you saying, okay, this is where we're at, this is what we're working with?
So when we train our juniors like a 10-year-old, I would look at them as like a 22-year-old. So I train them like I would train a pro athlete. But with the juniors, what we do specifically, or what I do specifically, is we want to make sure that they're trained as a good athlete. So number one, we want to make sure they're a good athlete. And what that means is they're able to move very quickly on the court, their fitness is on par, and they're just overall a really good athlete. Because you could be technically sound in tennis. You could hit a good forehand, you could hit a good backhand, but if you're not moving well on the court, you're going to have tough times later in life. So you have to be able to move really, really well on the court to be able to see the court. So it's important that the junior understands how to see the court, the angles, right? And to be a good athlete. That's, in my opinion, very, very important, because you have to be that really strong athlete to develop into a good player. And unfortunately, we see a lot of focus on the technique, which is very important. Don't get me wrong, but we forget about them moving. You'll see a good junior, but if you start to move them out of their comfort zone, they start to make errors. Because they're so comfortable down the middle. When you start to move them, they're like, oh crap, error. You know what I mean? Because they're not that good side to side or forward and back, just because they didn't dedicate as much time to the athleticism, to that fitness. And I think that's very, very important. And you'll see that with Nadal. Like, the guy's a monster. He'll get every ball back, right? Now, is his technique great? Not really. His technique is not, the greatest technique that we've seen. Certainly, he'll hit some shots that are just not part of the book, but he hits a great shot. He gets it in, right? And he'll fight for every ball. And I think that's what needs to be instilled in younger juniors, to fight and never give up for any ball. Doesn't matter if, let's say you get it back, but the guy puts a winner. Any ball that you put across the net, you're putting pressure on your opponent, because now they have to hit it over too, right? So I always say, any ball that you get back, doesn't matter where it is, you're still putting pressure on your opponent because you got it back. And the guy's like, holy smokes, you got it back, right? So you got to be able to work on that key athleticism. And that's why it's important to do multi-sport as well. Like, if you do soccer, hockey, basketball, you're going to really work on that footwork. That's going to transfer over into tennis. if ultimately you do make that shift into tennis, right? Especially, let's say if you're a big guy like Milos Raonic, 6'6", or you're a junior that's already tall, and you know this person's gonna spurt up. You got to make sure that you really work on the athleticism and the fundamentals behind that, so they know how to move on the court, and you got to work on their advantages. So like, if they have a big forehand, you got to work with that. You know, you got to try to build that in their game and really use that as a weapon. So we try to make sure that the junior develops a weapon, and they really use that weapon a lot as well.
That's really interesting you say that because as a guy who's played football and hockey at those levels, I see in Romanian football, for example, a lot of the players don't have that raw athleticism,
Yeah, 100%.
and people say, well, why aren't they surviving in the Bundesliga and the EPL, or yeah, the English Premier League
Yeah,
and the Serie A? And my response every time is they don't have those muscles developed
yeah,
around the joints. And if you don't have those, A, you're susceptible to injury, and B, you're just not going to be able to go into 50-50 battles.
no,
And
last and
those,
just will die out by the 80th minute, 70th minute, fitness wise.
yeah, and you can't focus mentally if your body's failing. And I look at tennis and I think of those 50-50 battles, like you said, where who's going to give first. It's not even about technique at that point. It's
No,
who wants it more, but also who can physically endure it.
yeah, and that's what it comes down to. 100%. It becomes a physical warfare. It's like two gladiators in the Roman times fighting, and whoever has the stamina and the fitness will come out of it. And a lot of the times, this has shown with Nadal. You know, he's 34. I mean, like, you know, there's younger guys playing him, and they'll gas out because he's just a phenom. He's just a monster out there physically, and just out grinding you is what he's doing. It's not. Yes, his tennis is fantastic, but it's also his will to win and that physical power that he has that he just outgrinds you. That's what it comes down to, right? So that's how he gets the W, even against guys that are 20 years old, 21, and should be a lot fitter, a lot faster. You know what I mean?
I said the same thing about Novak Djokovic, the first tournament major he went to. My mom was a big tennis fan, and we sat there watching this, and she disliked the guy because he had all these antics. But I said, look at his athleticism. I said, this guy's going to be number one. And she
Yeah.
thought, you're crazy. And I said, no, look at the way he moves.
Yeah.
Like, you look at the way this guy, it's so smooth.
It's
Everything's almost like music, you know? You can't, you can't, you can't teach that.
no,
Like,
he can't.
it's impossible to teach.
Yeah. That's genetics, and he's moving like a gazelle out there, and his fitness is unbelievable. But he does put in the time to work on that and daily, and certainly he pushes on that category. And he's got a good team around him, but that's also genetics as well, I must say.
So my question now is with COVID, you've got your programs in tennis that hopefully Doug Ford's going to be opening up because he said tennis and golf very soon.
I hope so. As a matter of fact, I think he's speaking now at 11:30. So hopefully, we're hearing positive news. We're hearing rumors and rumblings that he's going to open it up. So, as a matter of fact, there was an interesting map a colleague of mine sent me, and they show the whole world all green, as in like places you could play tennis and golf, and the only red spot in the entire world was Ontario.
Oh my
Out
God.
of the whole world, 7 billion people could play tennis and golf, but here in Ontario we can't because it's not safe.
And the risk for you, like I'm speaking to tons of nurses and doctors, and look, I'm a big supporter of taking care of yourself and people around you, but the risk outside is almost zero.
Yeah, it's such a small risk, and the thing is, when we're teaching, we're 75 meters apart outside. The closest I'll get to a small child is if I'm working with a 5-year-old is 2.5 feet, 3 feet maybe, just because I'm doing feeding. And you know, there's ways that I could do it where I don't have to touch their racket. I could just show them and they'll mimic me, right? In this COVID time, so the closest I'll get is 3 feet outside. So like, it's not like I'm breathing in their face or I'm touching them, you know. And we're not indoors, so it's extremely safe. The chances of you know, catching COVID are very, very, very low, very low.
And people who are working in service, they're also getting tested regularly, right?
Yeah.
So on your and when you guys open back up, uh, a lot of parents are at home, a lot of people are at home. Are you guys running any special programs to encourage people to get active and be part of your club during this
Yeah, we do a lot of
interesting time?
yeah, we're doing a lot of Zoom calls, just checking in on people, specifically their mental health. I know that that's a big factor now, especially with COVID, people just being blocked inside. So we're checking in on a lot of people, a lot of our members, a lot of our juniors, and even a lot of our pro players. Just I'm always checking in with people to make sure they're doing okay during these times, and if they need any support, I'm always there 24/7. And just to keep them going and keep that positive thought that we're gonna get out of this sometime soon, and we're gonna get out there again, and we'll get back to what we do.
And we're getting close to summertime. Are your camps still running?
We don't know. We don't have information right now from the province or the city, so we're not really sure how that's going to pan out. We do hope it's going to happen. We will adjust whatever they tell us. We will make adjustments. Obviously, we do believe that campers and staff will not be allowed in the clubhouse. Only very few, so that might be a factor. But we will always adjust. We always adjust, and we'll make it happen.
That's great. And you know what? I think Ontario made a big mistake not transitioning with programs in place to have outdoor activities open up.
Absolutely.
And guys like you are warriors in your club because the summer is what you financially depend on.
100%.
So when we look at what we're heading into now at the summer, if it's open, you're confident that look, it's safe, you can have fun, you can get back to a little bit of normality.
Absolutely. Yeah, we believe it's very safe. We believe it's very safe, and we did it last year. We did it last year, and certainly we didn't do group lessons. We only had privates and semi privates and very small clinics, call it camps. But we had no outbreaks. We monitor everything. We have contact tracing through our booking system. So everybody that comes in and plays, we know who you are. We know what time you played. So everything was written down, put in the computer in the Excel sheet. So we had everything written down. We had no outbreaks. We had no COVID. We would always ask people, hey, have you traveled in the last 14 days? We go through all the questionnaire. So we ran a very tight ship, and it showed we had no cases. And that goes for pretty much all the clubs. I didn't hear of any COVID outbreaks at tennis or golf. As a matter of fact, I read an article that they had 20 million tee-offs last year, 20 million in Ontario, and not one COVID case.
Yeah, and a month ago, my kid was in dance, inside
Yeah,
the dance studio a month ago. But people can't go to summer camps
outside.
outside.
Yeah, it's the
Like she was with 8 other kids.
I know it's the science that they say, and I think it boggles the mind of the doctors too. But you can't fight the government if that's what they want to say, and if that's the way they want to play it, we can't really do much. And I know we've with tennis we've had 2 or 3 petitions. One of them that we've started together, and the OTA as well has been a big supporter. They wrote letters to the MPs. I personally wrote letters. So we've put that pressure on the parliament and the ministers and stuff like that, and also the city councilors. So they know, they're aware, and I think we've had over 95,000 signatures for these
Wow.
petitions. Yeah, golf has had over like 200,000. Tremendous support. So they know, they're aware of it. And as a matter of fact, I think this morning I heard John Tory say, I want to open up the golf courses. I really do, but it's ultimately up to the province. So we'll find out probably right now. Doug Ford is speaking, and hopefully, he's aware. He knows. And I get that the numbers are not good, and there's all these new variants in play, and the hospitals are slammed, and I do get that. But for people's mental health, and I think fitness and being active is such an important factor of you not getting sick. Just being active and being in the fresh air away from your house, and if you live in a condo like I do, the vents might not be the healthiest thing. You might be better to be outside in fresh air, right? So just to be active and get your mind away from being pretty much locked up every day.
Absolutely. And on that note, thank you so much for being with me today,
My
Radu. I'm so happy to have gotten your expertise, and I'm hoping that there's some good news from Doug Ford right now for you.
Let's hope. Let's hope. Thank you very much. Yes.
Have a great day.
All right. I appreciate it.
VC Simon, the truth is king, and we're signing out.
Thank you.